And thinking about those places you've worked and the people that are there, how well do you think those companies will execute their transition to AI? Because this is coming, it's inevitable. They won't be able to avoid it.
I think they will install transition, whatever, to AI brilliantly. All of them will. The question of whether or not it gives them the outcomes they're looking for is a totally different question, right? Because, yeah, you know what? I have invented this magic whiz-bang AI app that if I stick some numbers in the one end and it comes out the other end, that's easy. The question of whether or not it's achieving the outcomes, and this is this whole thing about where are we going, right? There's a very clear step. Number one, where are we? Number two, where are we going? Number three, how do we get there? Number four, how do we make it stick? Don't give me 1, 3, 2, 4. Give me 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I'm playing with words a little bit there, but very clearly, every organisation who tries to do something with AI will somehow or another make it work. But are they better off? Well, I don't know. It depends a bit on what they were trying to achieve.
Welcome to the Hitchhiker's Guide to AI Governance, the podcast for anyone trying to make sense of intelligent machines, messy politics, and everything in between. But don't panic. Today, we're in the far reaches of the galaxy speaking with Neil Butler from Untypical, a boutique change management consulting practice. Neil isn't your average change manager. He has led, influenced, presented, trained, reconciled, rebooted, energized, negotiated, podcasted, and broadcast his way out of messes that don't fit neatly into anyone's job description. Overflowing with lived experience, versatility, and a little dose of well-placed mischief, Neil is perfectly positioned for navigating the complex change that comes with AI transformation. So welcome to the pod, Neil.
Thanks, Bruce. Nice to chat to you again. I'm a bit concerned about overflowing with lived experience. I think that is a euphemism for really old. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, possibly, because I was on a podcast this time last week with a couple of fellows from Ireland who said to me that they believe the adoption and transformation of AI will be led by people who are in their 50s plus, because they've got the lived experience. They've been through the email implementations. They've been through the laptops on the desk. They've been through ERP rollouts. They've been there, done that, got the T-shirt and the scars to prove it. What do you think of that, Neil?
Well, the only problem going to be, if I can just go on my little soapbox for a moment, is given that recruiters ignore anybody who's over 50, they're going to have to be really creative about it, because there's this mentality that says old people, and I use that term in inverted commas and smiling because I am one of those old people, they're not really all that valuable anymore, when in fact, of course, their experience becomes really, really important. And I'm very pleased to hear that the good folks of Ireland think that way.
Well,
grabbing my passport as we speak.
Well, it's amazing what they can do after a few Guinnesses. But the key point was that a 25-year-old who's typing stuff into a ChatGPT prompt will not have the lived experience to look at the output and say, does that make any sense or not?
Absolutely.
I think that's their point.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, there's so much we could talk about and, probably will. But, this concept that says AI is everything is just so far wrong in my mind that I guess we'll uncover that over the next little while.
Yeah, so I'll digress a little bit. So tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you and what are you up to?
Okay, well, I'm Neil. We've worked that bit out. I run a small business called Untypical. I don't like the word consulting because, consultants are the people who tell you what time it is using your watch, that kind of thing. But what I do is I work with people to take them on a journey, and I hate that expression as well, from somewhere they are now to where they need to be. Now, a lot of that falls into the change management bucket, so I guess you could argue that I'm a change manager. I really dislike that term, particularly when it's got a capital C and a capital M on the front of it. We'll come to that, no doubt. But I was a school teacher in the 90s and stepped out of teaching for 6 months and thought I'd just see what was going on in the industry. And here we are in 2026. I haven't quite stepped back in yet, probably won't, if I'm being honest. And I do a bit of broadcasting, do a bit of podcasting, basically do anything really, and not terribly well, you understand, but spend a lot of time talking.
Well, it sounds like you've got, to me, that feels like what's called a portfolio career, where you've got multiple income streams doing different types of work that keeps you pretty busy, but it's quite satisfying.
Satisfying, Not so much on the income, but that's okay. We're working towards something special on that boat, I hope.
So you can, thinking back, you're a teacher in the 1980s through to your career in the corporate world up until now.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a particular moment or news story that made you start paying attention to AI and taking it more seriously?
Probably not. I was listening to you, the first episode of this series during the week, and Daryl Carlton, I think the gentleman's name was, and Daryl was talking about the fact that AI has been around since the mid-50s in various forms. And so I'm not even that old. I mean, I may look it to you, but, I'm not even that old. And so, it's always been there in some form or another. And I did study a bit of computing stuff at uni in the early 80s. So AI was being talked. So it's kind of always been in the background. But with that in mind, clearly, I'll call it ramp up, if you like, of what's been going on. My previous client that I was working with for 3 years, I did a stint with them 2 years earlier for 3 years, if that makes sense. So sort of an 8-year period. In that first 3 years, AI wasn't even talked about. In the second lot of 3 years, it was all over the place. So that's somewhere in there, something happened, and I don't know what it is. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I'm thinking.
Yeah. So thinking about what you do, and in the context of AI being in the background, which is now coming to the forefront, what's the change that you seek to make in the world in your professional life?
Well, I guess change management's a thing that's been around since probably the late 90s as a discipline, if you want to think of it that way. Capital C, capital M, as I like to refer to it as. And the irony of it is that the people who do it are doing change, and yet nothing's really changed in change management since then, right? So and this sounds like a paid advert, and I haven't been sent an invoice, so I'll make it a free advert. I'm bringing out a book next month, that is to say May, because we're recording this in April 2026, called Change and the Art of Transformation, which is a topic we might get to a little bit later on. But change because change management doesn't work, right? How often do you hear people say, I don't even know why we had a change manager? Or worse, we need a comms and change manager. No, you don't. What you need is a change leader. Now, think about the things you manage. You manage your assets. You manage your budget. You manage your workload. You manage things, lead people. And at the end of the day, the most important thing, bar none, is people. When you're doing change, it's all about people. So with that in mind, I'm driving like crazy towards changing the world of change leadership. And interestingly, since I started a page on LinkedIn for the book, I'm now getting a lot of stuff in my feed from people who are of the same belief that we need to do something about change management because change management simply doesn't work. The other thing that comes into my mind here is that how often do you hear people going, oh, I'm so sick of change. Like, we've had so much, I've got change fatigue. Well, last time you and I spoke, you didn't have that bookshelf behind you. Last time we spoke, you were wearing a different hoodie. Last time we spoke, we were different ages. I mean, we change all the time. What we don't do well is deal with uncertainty, right? So let's get rid of change fatigue and too much change and I don't like change. Bruce, if I was to send you a ticket that said you have now won an apartment on the Gold Coast that is yours for the rest of your life and you can go up there every 2 weeks for a week, that's a change you're going to like. So don't give me, I don't like change, right? Talk to me about the fact that if I have certainty, I feel better about it. If I have uncertainty, I don't know what's going to happen. So they're the things I'm trying to drive towards.
So Neil, I just need to know, will that apartment have a balcony and a view of the ocean?
Well, it may well, depending upon which one I choose.
So you've talked about change management as being around, in some respects, trying to control. When you manage something, you're trying to control it and stop it getting out of control, right?
Correct. Yep.
So that's exactly what's happening with AI. We're trying to manage it so that it doesn't get out of control and do things it ought not to. So thinking about change in the context of these AI systems is the traditional model of change is around, this is assessing someone's current situation, where do they want to be in the future, and then figuring out how do you get there. And that in that sort of 3-step model is a whole lot of politics, humans, preferences, all of that stuff that comes into a change framework. But how will AI be useful or otherwise in facilitating that process?
Well, you've taken 3/4 of my model of change. There's a fourth bit there. So yes, where are we now? Where do we have to get to? How do we get there? The bit about embedding it.
Okay.
Because if you pull the
Stickiness.
bungee rope. If you pull the bungee rope, it'll spring back, right? It's one of those things. So yeah, it's an important distinction, but sadly one that isn't picked up a lot by a lot of change managers. They just go, well, delivered now, off onto the next project, and that doesn't work. In terms of AI, you're right. I think I talk about change leadership versus change management. Change management is making sure things don't get out of control. Change leadership is saying, we're going over there, guys. You want to come with me? Right? Now, yes, I get the sense that AI is driving a lot of change, and therein lies the problem in my mind. Now, again, this is just my opinion. There'll be other people that go, yeah, this bloke's crazy, doesn't know what he's talking about, living in the 80s, all that kind of stuff. But in my mind, if you are being driven by, and I'm using that term deliberately, AI, you got all sorts of strife. Because I was listening to episode 1, as I mentioned before, in this series earlier in the week, Daryl Carlton, and Daryl was talking about, I think he called it something like algorithmic decision making, I think was the term he used, right? Now, by definition, algorithm says doing it according to a formula, right? It's not very far away from a recipe, right? So if you use the same recipe, don't be surprised if you get the same cake. That's one of the sayings I like to use, and I know there's about 45 different versions of that, but let's run with mine just today because that's a new one that I don't think I'd heard before. But if you are doing a change management thing and you are following a process, and the process is more important than the outcomes, you got a problem. Far too many change people, I'll use that term to keep it nice and generic, work on the basis that the first thing that must happen is we must do a current state assessment as we all fall asleep and we hear these terms, right? I'm going to do a stakeholder engagement matrix, and then I'm going to do a comms plan. And no. First thing you want to talk about is, where are we going? So if you and I decide we need to be in Sydney tomorrow morning for a 9 o'clock meeting, we've got a whole stack of ways of getting there. I don't care, to be honest, whether we fly or drive or go by train or swim or get there, as long as we're there at the outcome we desire. And you know what? We're driving up the Hume Highway from Melbourne, and there's a sign that says, I'm sorry, the road's blocked. You've got to go by Shepparton. Okay, well, that's not the end of the world. At least I can pivot because I know where I'm going. Now, if AI is driving this thing and we don't control it, manage it, then you're asking for trouble, in my mind. The most important, I've probably said it already, the most important component of change are the people who are impacted by it and the people who are driving it.
Okay, well, let me just elaborate on that, because every generative AI tool comes with a disclaimer or a warning, is that the information we're giving you may not always be correct. So if you set the AI to take you to Sydney, what may happen, Neil?
Well, when I'm driving around in my car, I've discovered that I have a brand of phone that I won't mention because it's it's not a commercial event, but I ask SIRI, and I'm not going to say it out loud because my phone will ping into action. Ask ChatGPT what that building is at 123 Wombat Crescent. And it comes back and says, oh, it's the home of whatever, right? That's my little game that I play because I don't have to take my hands off the steering wheel. But it always says at the end, please check important information for accuracy. And I'm thinking, well, I understand why they have to do it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? So there's a very real chance that if you just let it go, you'll end up in Adelaide. And there's nothing wrong with going to Adelaide. Let us be very clear on that. It's just that it's at 90 degrees to the direction we intended to go.
Well, our Premier once said, why would anyone want to go there?
Well, he did say that, yes. He's not done with the Premier, is he?
No,
I think the MotoGP Grand Prix might have said something similar recently.
The Moto Grand Prix went there, and there's a few other things that have been going there as well. So good luck to those South Australians.
And good afternoon, good morning to all of you over there in Adelaide.
So taking that knowledge of or understanding of how AI can take you down the wrong path, if I give you a scenario, like just imagine this is what's happening in a lot of finance areas at the moment.
Yep.
There's the leader, which you talk about as being the change leader, says we're putting AI in because we want to be more efficient, more accurate, all of that stuff. So if you look at accounts payable, you've got a person there that's keying in invoices. All of a sudden, 3/4 of that person's role has been automated overnight. And so they no longer need to do that bit of their work. And that leaves, 6 hours a day. What's that? 30 hours a week for other stuff to do. How would you manage from a change perspective? I've used that word manage. How would you facilitate a change event to work through with that leader and introducing AI into that organisation? How would that look like from your perspective? What are the key things that you would bring to the table, help them consider and work out what the best way of approaching that is?
Well, as I've said already, probably 2 or 3 times, the most important thing in change are the people who are going to be impacted, right? So the lens through which I listen, that sounded very consultant, didn't it? The lens through which I look at this is very much from the people's perspective. The other thing I've already mentioned a couple of times probably is, what is the outcome? Now, when you think about a lot of programs that people put in place, and you and I have seen the introduction of email, we've seen the introduction of the internet, we've seen the introduction of mobile phones, we've seen the introduction of faxes, we've seen the introduction of faxes, we've seen all sorts of things come and go, all of which are going to cost people jobs, and they did. But that's funny, we've got probably a lower unemployment rate than we had ever before. So it can't have got rid of all jobs. It must have just got rid of a few and created a few. But the outcome of what we are doing is very rarely considered. So, for example, how often do you hear, we are going to introduce AI into finance, or we are going to install a new computer system, or we are moving offices, or we are going to introduce all these different things that people do? They never say, what we're going to do is undertake a project that is going to reduce the stress on the people who are trying to meet month end. Okay, how are you going to do it? Good question. Because again, going back to your model, my model of change, where are we now? Where do we have to get to? How do we get there? Seems to me a lot of projects, programs, whatever you want to call them, start off with, where are we now? How are we going to get there? Oh, and yeah, where are we going? Whatever. That bit at the end. Whereas you've really got to look at those outcomes. So if the outcome is to create a more efficient process, yeah, AI might be a component of that. Don't talk to me about introducing AI. Talk to me about reducing the workload on people using tools such as AI, or indeed email, faxes, telephones, whatever else has happened over the last 30 or 40.
So the challenge for CFOs is they will love a lot of this new technology, because theoretically it takes away, if it's done well, a lot of human error. So more accurate invoices, more accurate payments, more accurate cash flow, more accurate reports, and more productivity. So the CFO's going to love it, but maybe the staff might be fearing it. How would you deal with the fear in this context?
As we said earlier, people shouldn't be scared of change.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely 110% okay to be worried about uncertainty, right? So as a change leader, I want to be able to say to the people who are impacted, this is where we're starting. Today is where we are. We know where we are, right? So we do this and we do it this way. In 12 months' time, we want to be doing something different to reduce the cost of this or the impact of that or the inaccuracy of whatever. To do that, this is what's happening. Now, people, if I told you that you were going to lose your job, do you want to find that out now? Or do you want to be uncertain for 6 or 8 or 12 months and then go, by the way, Bruce, right? To me, it's the uncertainty that causes grief and causes change programs to fall off the rails, not the change itself. So an element of what I would do is try and understand what it is they're trying to achieve. And don't give me, we're implementing AI. Don't give me, we're moving from SAP to something else. That is a methodology to get to where you want to go. Where are we going, right? It would be like you and I getting up and off to somewhere. We don't know where we're going, but we've caught up at Spencer Street, Southern Cross, what it's called these days in Melbourne, and we jump on a train. Well, that's the equivalent of we're implementing AI. We could end up in Warrnambool, we could end up in Traralgon, or we could end up in Sydney. Tell me where we're going, and then we can understand what it is that we need to do and how it's going to impact on people.
And that's the leadership component.
Absolutely. And don't give me business impact assessments. Give me people impact assessments, if you want to call them those. I have a simplified change plan thing that I work with, and I don't have a BIA. I have a slide that says who's going to be impacted, right? The important thing is there, who, not what, who's going to be impacted. How are they going to be impacted? Right? It's about people after all. And I know I keep coming back to that, and dodging the hard question about how do I convince the CFO. CFOs, and bless them, we'd be in all sorts without them. They are focused on dollars, and I get that. But I keep going back to the question of, would you rather have a car that's worth $250,000 or a car worth $30,000? Well, I think I'd rather have the car that's $250,000. But are you prepared to pay for it? Oh, hang on. No, that's a bit different, right? So it's this question of value for money. Yeah, okay, let's get rid of 3 people and get rid of some. But if the inaccuracy goes up by 5%, again, you were talking to Daryl in that previous episode about, I think he calls it garbage in, gospel out. If it goes into the computer, it comes out, the computer's got to be right. Well, that's absolute bollocks. And you only have to look at some of the stuff that AI produces to realize it's, again, that disclaimer question.
Well, that's when people of our vintage would be able to look at an outcome from AI and question it and have a skeptical eye. And not accept that it is gospel. That's the value I think this generation or our generation will bring to this transition.
Yeah, and I think I go back to my school teaching days. I used to teach a subject called mathematics, which apparently our friends across the ocean like to now call math. It will always be mathematics. And as a mathematics teacher, one of the things I used to always encourage kids to do was to say, if I give them a piece of simple arithmetic, 1.97 times 4.85. Well, what's the answer going to be? Well, it ain't going to be 40. It's kind of a little bit less than 2 times a little bit less than 5. So you'd expect it to be a little bit less than 10. It's that sense check stuff, right? So that if a kid I used to actually, give them 0 marks that they got it wrong. But if they put a stupid answer, I'd give them -2. So, what's 5 times 5? And they give me an answer that's, 15,000. You go, that's not even close, right? So it's about that concept of being able to say, does that make sense to me? And, without disrespecting our friends who are 25, they're probably not quite as equipped to do that.
So you've worked for a lot of companies, Neil, in your lifetime, and also both some corporates and some not-for-profits. And thinking about those places you've worked and the people that are there, how well do you think those companies will execute their transition to AI? Because this is coming, it's inevitable. They won't be able to avoid it, but at some stage they'll need to deal with it. How well do you think those companies will execute their transitions?
I'm going to deliberately play semantics here. I think they will install transition whatever to AI brilliantly. All of them will. The question of whether or not it gives them the outcomes they're looking for is a totally different question, right? Because, you know what? I have invented this magic whiz-bang AI app that if I stick some numbers in the one end and it comes out the other end, that's easy. The question of whether or not it's achieving the outcomes, and this is this whole thing about where are we going, right? Don't tell me. There's a very clear step. Number 1, where are we? Number 2, where are we going? Number 3, how do we get there? Number 4, how do we make it stick? Don't give me 1, 3, 2, 4. Give me 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I'm playing with words a little bit there, but very clearly, every organization who tries to do something with AI will somehow or another make it work. But are they better off? Well, I don't know. It depends a bit on what they were trying to achieve.
So thinking about where you're headed, and because that's what we've just been talking about, being clear about, what direction we're heading, what's next for you, Neil?
Oh, now, has anyone got an AI app I can throw that into? One of the great things about being me is I really don't know. I'm currently wrestling with the fact, and for those who can't see me, and that's most of you because this is an audio event, I'm in my early 60s, a time where most of the people I went to school with are talking the R word, retirement, and I am both financially unable and intellectually unable, if that's the right word, emotionally unable to even vaguely consider retirement because I would go nuts. So the wrestling I'm having at the moment is, do I have enough going on that would enable me to earn enough money to not have to go back into the corporate world? Now, to those recruiters who are listening and are going, oh, he's not there. No, I am quite keen to actually get back into the corporate world for a couple more years, but that's kind of the wrestle I've got at the moment. And the stuff that I do, the AI stuff, won't impact on me as much as it might other people because I am the opposite of process driven. I am all over the shop. So, for example, broadcasting. Yes, you can have AI broadcasting, and sadly, there's a number of radio stations who do that already in some way, shape, or form, but it'll never be proper broadcasting. Podcasting, yes, there's lots of podcasts out there. I was reading something this morning. I was on the train. I was reading something about a podcast that's out there where someone just goes into something like a chat GPT and says, write me the script for a podcast that discusses whether or not AI Governance Partners is a really good organization to work with, for example. And then it's written as a 2-person thing. Then they shuck it into 11 labs and bingo, they've got a podcast. But that's not a conversation. You might as well read it, right? So to my way of thinking, the stuff I do won't be impacted a great deal by AI, but the stuff around me will, if that makes sense. And again, I come back to the same thing over and over and over and over again. And that is, it's all about what you're trying to achieve. And what I'm trying to achieve is a sensible income, if that allows me to continue doing what I'm doing, and the opportunity to talk to various people, whether it's about this sort of stuff that we're talking about, or whether it's about why they choose to live in a small country town in Western Australia. It's about interacting with people. And AI is never going to get there. We'll get a really good vanilla version, but you'll never get to where real people can get to in that sort of work.
And what do you think of the automation of typical things that used to be done by a comms team, like generation of content for a company website, for newsletters, communications to customers? Where do you see that going?
Well, again, at the risk of playing semantics, I am of the very firm opinion that no organisation should have a comms team. Now we've just lost half your listeners. just see the energy level has dropped there.
They've all dropped off. They'll never come back, Neil.
However, what you do need is an engagement team. Now, I'm being semantic again. I see communications as printing off a whole lot of brochures, running down to the fence, hurling them over the fence and hoping someone picks one up and reads it, right? And that's where newsletters sit. And that's where, the old-fashioned website fits. You need someone to go, I tell you what I really do need to read about. I need to read about this thing. Change leadership doesn't involve that. Engagement, on the other hand, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about engagement as in, do you want to marry me engagement, or a room or a toilet cubicle is engaged. That is, there's a relationship that underlines everything. Engagement is about a relationship. Now, if you are driving a customer-focused organization, how on earth can you do that with AI exclusively? I'm not saying don't use it to draft stuff or anything like that. But if you are reliant upon AI to communicate with your customer, and I use communicate deliberately there, you're going to get people who might read or not, who knows. Whereas if the outcome, there's that word again, is to build a relationship with your people to people. I was talking to someone this morning, they were talking about B2B and B2C. I haven't yet got to AI to C and seen it as working all that terribly well. So I think, that's to me the future. Yeah, training programs. Yeah, knock yourself out. Go on to an AI tool and say, I want to know how to record a podcast. Run me a training program. Okay, bang, off it goes. Now, if it comes back and you publish that, you are nuts, because everyone who's got half a brain can read stuff and go, well, this is AI generated. But over time, if you decide to use it to draft stuff, absolutely. In fact, at the risk of the ad again, in my book, at the start, in the preface, I have said none of this book is written using AI. It is every handwritten from the start, except chapter 6, 7, whichever one it is, where I've gone to AI and said, what is transformagination? And I've actually asked it to describe what it thinks it is. And I've put that in, and it's very clearly stated at the front, this bit's written by AI, because people can tell, right? And if you are writing to a formula, and Mills and Boone back in the 1800s and whenever it was that they were writing their books, they were written to a formula. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, this is Mills and Boone. Well, AI is the same. AI is going to produce the same stuff because, again, it is based on an algorithm. Algorithm equals recipe. Recipe equals if you use the same recipe, you get the same cake. And, the telltale signs of the structure that AI has and the use of that particular dash and all that kind of stuff, at least do yourself the favor of going through and reading it and going, oh, I better take those dashes out, because people will say a mile away. And if you don't care enough about me to invest some time in writing something that you are engaging with me, I don't want to work with you. I'll go and find a service provider who cares about me enough.
So that's ironic that AI, one of the ironies is it uses historical data that it's analyzing to work out patterns for communication or for recruitment or for processes or whatever they happen to be, but it's going to inherit all the things that you did in the past and regurgitate those. So if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. Yep. So you'll always get what you always got, which is a biased recruitment tool, but inefficient or ineffective processes in processing invoices, for example, because it's just going to learn what you used to do and replicate it, right?
Yeah, well, not only replicate, sometimes analyze. And if someone says, and this is a really good use of AI, right? I'm thinking of launching a product. I've got a widget that I'm going to sell, right? I need to know who else is in the market what they're selling their widgets for, and what their sales figures look like. Yeah, I could do that work myself. Get AI to do it. It comes back and says, here's some info. Now you look at it and you go, is this accurate? And all the kind of disclaimers that go with that. You might do some sense checking on it. That to me is sensible. But if this concept of transformagination, which I won't talk a lot about beyond saying by the book, but transformagination is based on not what should we do, what could we do, right? Because a lot of change activity is based on the fact that we can't really push the boat out too far, because what happens if it all goes wrong? Well, what happens if it all goes right? That's the other half of that question. But so you'll never learn to swim if you don't let go of the side of the pool, is another analogy that I like to use. So if you are always looking at what you should do, should by definition refers to some kind of standard, some kind of expectation, some kind of assumption that you're going, well, we should do this or we shouldn't do that. Let's get thinking about what we could do, because that's where innovation is. And use your AI tool to help you. Don't get your AI tool to do it, is, I guess, where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So thinking about all these AI tools that we've got now that can help us, draft emails and do this little bit of work that we used to do just on our own. What do you miss most about the 1990s in IT or in the 1980s? What is it, those things in IT that you miss? What do you miss the most when you're thinking back about how the world used to work?
Apart from my magnificent BP identity card photo, which had me with a mustache and a mullet. Apart from that, things I miss. I think the simplicity. And I know simplicity equals lack of sophistication equals lack of being able to do much. I remember my first ever computer program was written in Fortran using color-coded cards, like the punch cards, but you actually those things. And I can remember having a stack of card about that thick, which doesn't help on audio. What would it be? About 6 or 7 inches thick, card on card on card on card. And what it did was it produced the numbers from 1 to 25, and in the column next to it, the number that number squared. Right now, do I miss that? I kind of miss it, but only for sentimental reasons. You understand, particularly when someone grabbed those cards and threw them in the air and they landed out of order. That was always a bit of fun. But I think the fact that you could, in fact, control the talked all about not having control, but control the outcomes a bit better, right? Unfortunately, what tends to happen now is, and Agile to some extent has both improved this and what's the opposite of improved? What's the opposite of improved? Made it worse. There you go. That'll do. This capacity to sort of go, oh, well, we'll do this 2 weeks. No, we're going to, and you get to the 2 weeks and then you turn off to the right or you turn off to the left. Whereas the other thing that makes it good is you've got sort of sense checks along the way every 2 weeks. So you can take that either way you look at it. But I think projects that were quite closely defined, and like the project I worked on throughout the 90s was a thing that was ERP by any other name, for regional fuel distributors. And going in and being able to work with people to install a program, knowing they were getting 100% of the value out of it. These days, if you go and buy yourself an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever, what proportion of the phone's functionality are you actually using? 5%? 10%? So I don't know that answers the question, but it's just some ramblings that were going on in my head. When you talked about the 90s, I thought you might have a photo of my hair. It's good.
I've got a couple to add to that. One of them is the tactile nature of work, because we used to print things out. We used to have paper brochures. We used to have newspapers. We used to have hardcover books, and the things that we used to do in our jobs, we would touch and feel them. Whereas we feel a bit disconnected now from your actual work, because it's just a digital image that you're creating and building, and you're not seeing it come to life. That's one of the things that I'm missing. The other would be, this is something that, and you would have a view on this. So
I've got a view on everything, Bruce. Everyone's entitled to my
ramp up in terms of things like disciplines. So you would have project management as a discipline. All of a sudden you have a Prince2 framework, and then you'd have an agile framework that followed it. And in the building industry, you had the building code that you had to follow. So what this kind of ways of working was suddenly becoming highly bureaucratic. I could probably
it's a good observation.
Yeah, so when we used to do projects in the late 90s into the early sort of 2000s, there wasn't 1,000 documents that you had to fill out. You could actually get on with the project, and you would be able to when you say it was a simpler world, it was simpler.
Yeah.
And that's something that I miss. So
Yeah.
now we're filling out, we've got the Prince 2 guide's now got about 1,000 pages in it.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And change management, capital C, capital M, has a thing called a PROSCI, PROSCI, which I think stands for however you want to pronounce it. And I don't have one of those, and I deliberately don't have one of those. If someone came to me and said, I'm thinking of getting into change management, what do you think I should do? Absolutely. Knock yourself out, go and do the process. I've been doing change management for longer than that's been around, right? Yeah. And I know for a fact, because I know recruiters who have told me this, when job descriptions are put onto your LinkedIns and your Seeks and your Indeeds and all those sort of places, clearly they're cutting and pasting the same criteria from other jobs. Every senior change role that is on the system is senior change manager for starters. It's not leader. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you're looking for a change manager, it will always say 5 to 7 years of experience as a change manager. Senior tends to be 10 or more, right? Now, I don't know what happens if you've got 7 to 10, because 5 to 7 is the first group and 10 and above is the other. But keeping that aside for a minute, and you need to have a PROSCI, whatever you want to call it, qualification will be highly regarded, right? Highly regarded means when the applications come in, because everyone's a change leader, that by definition, I know I do a bit of change. What they do is they're getting hundreds of applications from people who want change roles. Far and away, the easiest way to deal with that is to say, right, go through all of the applications and get rid of anyone who doesn't have the qualification, right? That makes, right, instead of having 500, now only got 150. Okay, of the 150, how many of those can demonstrate on their resume that they've got 5 to 7 or 10 or more or whatever it happens to be? Oh, beauty, got rid of another 70 of them. Well, now it's manageable, right? So to me, that's where AI is killing recruitment, because I had this conversation with someone the other day, and I'm pleased, don't think I'm being conceited about this. I've been doing change since probably the late 1990s. So let's call it 30 years, right? There was someone rang me and said the client has come back and said that they don't want to talk to you because you don't have a PROSCI, let's call it PROSCI for the sake of the argument. And I said, okay. He said, so I've put forward 3 other applicants. I said, okay, I don't want names. I don't want anything. Tell me how many years these people have been doing change. 4, 7, and 8 years. And I said, so someone who's got 4 years of experience and this piece of paper that took them 5 days to get is going to be able to do the job better than me. And he said, and this is the great recruiter cop out, no, I don't think that's what the client wants. So to me, this, and of course, that I'm generalizing, disclaimer, please check your own independent financial advice, all that kind of stuff, just to get the disclaimers out of the road. Many people, not all, many people who've got qualification, whether it be Prince or PROSCI or any of these other Agile, any of these other things, drive that process as the most important thing, right? Oh, you can't do the BIA yet because you haven't done the stakeholder and give me a spell, right? Now, I clearly don't work to a structure. But I reckon I'm probably okay at being a change person because I work with people. I can pivot much easier because you know what? Sometimes projects don't go as they're meant to. Sometimes the Hume Highway is being dug up and you do need to divert via Shepparton to get round it, right? Meanwhile, you've got these people who are so focused on the artifacts. And that's the other thing, please don't call them documents, call them artifacts, because that's what we've got to call them, because they sound so much more important when they're artifacts. I recall in one particular place I worked, having a 1.5 hour meeting with one colleague who rang me to say he wanted to have the meeting because there was an issue that we needed to deal with in the change plan. When I got into that room, we turned up, he sat opposite me and he said, right, I've gone through the document and it's clear that you have used the wrong color blue in the headings, the level 1 headings of the document. And you're laughing. That's exactly the response I gave him. And I said, so what's your point? 1, A, is it that important? And B, change it. And he said, now, the other question we've got to debate is whether or not that validates the need to make a different version number. So do we take it from 3.7.2 to 0.7.3? I said to him, look, I'm happy to delegate that decision to you. And he said, okay, I need your input. The ridiculous level of bureaucracy, to use the word you used, that is now in any project, whether it's an IT project or anything else, is just out of control.
I mean, you spend more time on the bureaucracy than you do on the actual project.
But you know why? The reason is quite clear, and why they have the PROSCI or whatever. Hiring managers don't understand what change leadership is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that situation, when it all turns to you know what, and quite often it does, because we're not focused on the outcomes, we're focused on whatever it is to how we're going to get there kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They go, well, hang on, no, whoa, don't blame me. I got a change manager who had a qualification. I saw the stakeholder engagement. I saw the BIA, which, by the way, isn't a process, not a document. I saw the training plan. I saw the comms plan. So by definition, it's not my fault, right? The more artifacts you can have and the more you can tick off your tick list, the much easier it is to justify when it all turns wrong.
Yeah, when it all goes pear-shaped.
Yeah.
I've got another one.
We're not getting stuff done.
Oh my goodness. We were in the good old days. I used to have one or two, maybe three of us at the most. We rolled out a ERP system in 13 countries with 3 people in 2.5 years.
Yep.
So that was, you could never do that now. That project now would cost, you'd need a team of at least 10.
Yep.
It would take 4 years and cost 3 times as much.
Absolutely. And you would probably need to bring in one of the big 4.
Yeah.
To make it, again, to cover what part of the anatomy of the hiring manager. Classic example of this, I worked for an organization a little while ago, and the program I was working on was the reinvigoration, let's use that word, of the system that they were using to drive their business. 2,500 small businesses across Australia. And as you can imagine, if they're in that, some of them are going to be in the centre of Melbourne and some are going to be in the middle of nowhere, right? They were businesses of all sorts. The powers that be decided that they would bring in one of the big 4. We won't know names, you understand. They were going to bring in a team of 9 fully qualified organisational psychologists to deliver the change management program. I thought they were taking the you-know-what, to be honest. And
how many organisational psychologists does it take to change a light bulb, Neil?
That's right. Yeah. They probably wouldn't change it, but they'd have a hell of a set of documents. So, artifacts, beg your pardon.
Just hang on a second. The light bulb just has to want to be changed first, doesn't it?
It does. And of course, the other component is no one really cares because we're not worried about the outcome. We just need to make sure we've got these documents on the way. Anyway, I sat in the meeting I was getting quite edgy about it. And at the end of the meeting, they went on their merry way. Oh, by the way, $1.6 million was going to cost us for that. Forget about any of the other costs associated with it. They walked out and I said to my boss, you know what? Get me someone who can help me with the engagement activities, not comms. The engagement activities, we'll do this ourselves. There were 2 of us who did all of the engagement and all the change activities associated with it, including visiting, I think it was 45 different businesses in a 30-day period to go and sit down because that was part of the engagement. I'm not going to send out a note to some guy who runs a business, got 7 users in this. I'm going to go out and see him. I spent a bit of time in airplanes that week. But we got it done because it wasn't about, let's have a plenary session and all. No, just get on and do it. I have a methodology that I use and its acronym is GST, get stuff done or something along those lines, right? And yes, there's a requirement for structure. There's a requirement for auditable stuff. But if you get bogged down in that and that becomes more important than that word again, the outcome, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to go around in circles.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, if you're applying for a job now, as you mentioned earlier, that they screen all the resumes. So now they've got AI tools that you can point it to a job ad and then craft my resume exactly for the job.
Yeah.
And then the hirer's got a tool that says, look for any resumes that look like they've been crafted by AI based on that job.
Yeah. The other option, of course, do it yourself and appear human. But the problem is that then you end up not being matched by the AI tool. It's just a joke. And any recruiter who thinks that using AI to decide on who the applicants are, I'm not saying don't use AI to, gather information and do some initial stuff. Anyone who just thinks that AI is the way to determine who should be shortlisted, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts.
So, Neil, tell me just a little bit about what's coming up with this book. Why have you written a book?
Have you ever written a book?
No.
So until you have, you won't know why.
Yeah.
You get to a point, and this is my second go at it, second book. You get to a point that if you don't write it down, you would gradually go around the twist because there's all this stuff going on in your head and you don't actually have an opportunity to get it out, right? Yeah. So in my brain, this book is called Change, and the Art of Transformagination. Let me just give you a teaser on what that means. Change is obvious. The way we're doing change now is crazy. So it's time to change. That bit's easy.
Yep.
Think about your standard boring corporate office. There's a meeting room in the corner, right? It's beige. It's got the frosted glass, the one. I want to go in there and paint the wall green. That is a change activity. So you'll send out some comms, he said in inverted commas, to people saying, don't use room number 7 on Thursday and Friday because we're getting it painted. You can use it again from Monday, right? And you might take the room offline so that people can't actually book it. That's change. Transformation is making that room into a cafe because it's fundamentally changing the purpose, the mechanism, what it's being used for, right? So a lot of people think transformation is just big change. It's not. Big change, the word to describe big change is big change. Transformation is fundamentally changing something and the way it operates. Transformagination in that context is saying, suppose we didn't have that room. In fact, suppose we were a new business starting, knowing what we know, but what would it look like then? So it's transformation using imagination, hence the word. Yeah. That's a trademarked word, by the way, so don't go using it unless without. So the book talks about why we need to change. And unlike a lot of books that are out there about anything to do with business, and I'm looking behind you, and there's probably a whole heap of them on the shelf behind you, the book is written conversationally, and it's written in a way that is kind of a whole lot of anecdotes. It's written in such a way that if you can't read it on an aeroplane from, let's call it Melbourne to Brisbane, you're not trying hard enough. It's deliberately written to be short. It's deliberately written that you could open it at any page and go, oh, that's an interesting thought. Think of it a whole lot of blog posts in a book. That's where it is. So we talk about change, we talk about transformation, and then we talk about transformagination. It's due out in May. So whenever this goes out, it may already be out. But yeah, there you go.
All right. So just one more comment about AI and transformation is that a lot of people talk about this introduction of AI as a transition. I really believe it's a little bit more than that because it will be transformative, a little bit like, the horse and the cart of that magnitude, because transformation by definition means if you look back, you cannot recognize the new world to the old world. Whereas a transition means you're just bolting something on or you're just adding something.
It's a bit incremental.
So that's where I think what you're talking about is I think a lot of people have got that opportunity to think we could use AI, we could do it here, or maybe let's broaden our thinking and completely reinvent ourselves.
Transformaginate even.
So how can people reach you, Neil? What's the best way to find you?
Well, there is a website which is going to surprise you when I tell you what the website is. It's neilbutler.com.au. If you want to specifically look at the stuff about the book, there's a different website which is change.au, but that's the best option, and there's a whole lot of contact details on there. I'm on LinkedIn, obviously. Happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk to me.
Yeah, so I'd like to just throw something up in the air. Maybe in 6 months' time, when your book's been out and you've been doing some...
I've sold both copies.
And you've sold out and it's on the Wall Street Journal's top 100 books or the New York Times.
Yeah.
Have a chat again to see what change you've made.
Oh, by that stage, of course, you'll need to talk to my media manager. No, that'd be good. I'll be happy with that. Yep.
Yeah. So thank you again, Neil. This is Neil Butler, and you've been listening to The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI Governance. And if you like this episode, please do not hesitate to give us a rating. And if you need to contact us for any reason, or Neil for any reason, his information will be in the show notes. So thanks again, Neil.
No worries. Thanks, Bruce.